Hello, this is Rick Harnish. I'm the Executive Director of the High Speed Rail Alliance. Thank you very much for joining us today. Uh, I, for a little bit of background for those who are new, the Alliance is a nonprofit supported by our members. We seek to be the go-to source on what high-speed and regional rail are, why we need to build it, and what steps need to be taken in order to make these things a reality in the US. And then we give people like you the tools that you need in order to help educate your elected officials about why this is needed. We believe in an integrated network approach where multiple types of trains, including high-speed, regional, inter-regional, commuter, all work together with buses to connect entire regions, not just city pairs. I just want to point out, if you enjoy programs like this, if you go to hsrail.org and hit the Get Merch button, we have cool little notebooks that you can get as a thank you and as a way to share your support for high-speed rail across the country as you're talking with your friends. So if you go to hsrail.org and up in the upper corner, there's a Get Merch button. You can make a donation today. And thank you very much to those who have donated. Where these are really exciting times. We are at a really urgent point in getting high-speed rail started, and we need to spread the word very quickly. So years ago, I went to Japan in 2009, and I was getting on a high-speed train with a group of Japanese folks, and they took out their transit card and used their transit card to get onto the high-speed train. And they said that that transit card works anywhere in the country. Conversely, when I go to DC, I always forget to bring my Washington, DC transit card. And so I have a stack of about 20 of them in my dresser drawer at home. So I have this vision of a day where you can just tap on with a credit card to any transit mode in the country. I can do that at the CTA, just use my credit card, but you can't in Washington and you can't on Amtrak trains. So was very excited to hear about a program that the Capital Corridor, which runs between San Jose and Sacramento, and contracts with Amtrak to operate the trains, is in fact doing a tap-on program for the Capital Corridor trains. It's at this point just a test, but Jim Allison, who is the manager of planning for the Capital Corridor, has been kind enough to join us today in order to talk about what that test is and where they hope it will go. And so, Jim, I will turn it over to you at this point.
Great. Okay. Hopefully I'm coming through
Absolutely
clear. Good. I just got to get the slide deck up and open. Ready to
and while that's going, as a reminder, chat is for discussion. And if you have questions, there will be questions and answers at the end. Please put your questions in the Q&A button. And Chris Ott on our staff will ask those questions for you. So, Jim.
Okay, I'll take it away here.
Excellent.
Moment. And hope I'll get the right thing activated. Share. Okay, now one more step. Okay, hopefully you see a full screen. Is that correct?
We see presenter view.
Oh, okay. That was the danger. How about that? Okay, great.
There we go.
Okay, well, I'll take it away. Well, thank you, Rick, for inviting me to do this. This is very exciting. It's been a really interesting year that we spent with Tap2Ride, and you'll see through the presentation how we've been involved with this concept for quite some time, but I'll get into the slide deck and then hopefully leave some time for questions. So this is us, as it were. scooting along, and in this picture, you'll see a Tap2Ride event happening on the screen there. So I'll go to the next slide. Okay, I guess I'll advance it this way. Okay. Well, a little bit about Capital Corridor. We are an unreserved service, so riders don't need to reserve a seat. So it lends it to this opportunity to do Tap2Ride. We are an intercity passenger airline in Northern California. Different levels of service along the map that you see here, but our core is between Sacramento and the Bay Area. So we're bounded on both sides. In the Sacramento area, there's a what's called a closed loop system with a Sacramento area Connect card, and in the Bay Area, there's the Cuba sponsored system, the Clipper card, and that's what Rick's talking about. You've got to get the right transit money in your wallet. That's the closed loop system. But we wanted to do an open loop system, just like what retail merchants do, and that's the hope there is that you reduce all the barriers, you improve ridership and the customer experience as you go along. So we are also the fiscal sponsors of the grant monies used to develop the Cal-ITP system for the state. So it's a statewide initiative. It has several goals. One is that it is a basis for a common payment system, such as credit and debit cards, just like you pay for a cup of coffee today. So that's one of the key pieces, and that's what we'll focus on here. But then there's also another couple of components, which is real-time data, transit data standard, and that's unifying the way the information is gathered and presented, and the effort in all that standardized. And then finally is at a scale at the state is verification of eligibility for transit discounts, like age-based discounts, veterans, et cetera, like that. So using the state's scale in much of all this work to do this effort, and also using the state's master service agreements to purchase all the needed hardware and the software that we need to run this pilot that you're going to hear about here. So I'm going to talk about what an open loop fare payment ecosystem looks like. And it's essentially, we're trying to, allow customers to purchase transit just like they do a cup of coffee. The difference for transit is in this little yellow box here, which is this part here, that's where we insert the transit components. The rest of it's already supported by the banking system and the credit card systems. So what we insert in there, you're the hardware operator or the hardware owner of that solution is Cuba. We initially started with 4 payment readers on our double-decker cars. So we have 2 at the top of the stairs and 2 at the entry areas on the doors. And then the next step is to have a fare calculation software, which is the little pay component in this case, where they tap in and out on that piece of hardware, and the software there calculates the fares. And then the little pay information goes on to Elevon, and Elevon is the electronic payment acceptance processor. That's the acquirer that moves the money between these accounts. So all of these services are available to transportation providers across the U.S. Via that link I have there in the very bottom, the mobility marketplace. And indeed, there's some transit operators on the East Coast that are taking advantage of this. And the idea is to use scale and standards and get a good pricing and good favorable conditions for these elements to move ahead. So that's the traditional thing. So now that we have those components in place, the idea was we need to try this out. And it's not just as easy as turning on. So we looked at getting a small population of a certain folks that would be interested in this. We call them our pilot participants. And they were picked because they were a mix of nearly daily commuters or frequent riders, and maybe some weekend riders. And we had them register so we could know their name, we could have communications with them, and importantly, in compliance with their federal requirements to create a manifest list. So if there was ever an accident, you would know who's on board. So we have that information based on the tapping in because they've been registered. So we've installed all those hardware devices. We tested all the software. It runs on our Wi-Fi network on the train. And then the customers register. They do a register with us, and then they are sent to enter their credit card details with Little Pay. So we don't have any privacy conflicts or security issues with the credit card issuer companies. So the next step is you've registered and you get the chance to use it. And I'll show a quick video here. This is how it looks being used. It's pretty quick there. And then once you sit down and you're ready for travels, the conductor would come by using the inspection device, which I'll talk about in a bit, and validate that you did in fact tap in. And then you'll be expected to tap out. If you don't tap out, you'll get a penalty fare. So we spend a lot of time and information processing refunds of people that forget to tap out. And I will confess myself, I've done plenty of times early on, I forgot to tap out, and you just get busy with stuff. So that's one of the hurdles, that one of the learnings that we've had. But we give people a chance to correct that and get a refund from the penalty fare for where they should have tapped out. The pricing that we have for this is done right now via fare capping. It's a pay-as-you-go. And so the more you ride, eventually in the span of a week, it will be free for you. So after the 6th trip is made, the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, if you went all 5 days of the working week, you would get the last 2 days for free. So this is pricing based off of the Amtrak 10-ride price. And we discount it a little bit because everybody's doing this is involved in as kind of a guinea pig with us as well. So they have a fare calculation software to kind of figure out, is this a good match for me? And then there's other customer service tools where they can check their receipts, check their travel, make sure they didn't, if they had an incomplete journey as shown on this page, they can at least be aware of it and request a refund. So we provide a lot of information materials, social posts, and videos to explain how to tap into this process. So in short, this pilot has achieved our objectives. The objectives were to prove that it works on rail. It does. We kind of thought that that might be the case. We wanted to see if riders enjoyed doing this, and indeed they do. I'll show you some testimony on that in the past. But probably the most important thing for us was to get a chance to learn about how this works, what the impacts are for us. The Secretary of Transportation for California is testing it in the picture you see here. But truly the most valuable piece of this is what I'm going to talk about next, is everything we learned from this process. So first off, we, as you may imagine, we have Amtrak collecting most of the ticket revenue. We had never done ticket revenue collection because Amtrak did that. So we had to build the capacity to do that. We have never processed customer service in that area. We've never processed refunds or done corrections like that. So one of the biggest pieces that we had was just starting from zero and building up that capacity. So there's refund requests, and that involved really all areas of our team. We had to really mostly build up in the customer service side and the finance side the ability to deal with all those issues, to reconcile funds, to balance and be ready for audits, and track across these different systems, especially the fare payment calculation and the Elevon side, where it's the payments, match that all across our banking systems and make sure we're getting the revenue we should, and also processing refunds. So we started early on with it very manual. It was a small number of folks to deal with. And later, as we were able to, we would have our technical consultants, Zentrans, make an insights dashboard, which would give us insights to what taps tap outs hadn't happened, so we could easily process refunds. We can see the rider's history and see that, oh, they're probably due this amount of refund because they just forgot to tap out. They usually do tap out, and we give them, $2.60 back or what have you, to reconcile that. So that was a big lift to make ourselves ready for this. And it still is a big lift. We're not there yet, and we're certainly not ready for opening it up to all our riders because it would be a big impact. So we're kind of thankful for this process so we can walk before we have to run. So the next piece of it was in the conductor phase of it. As you saw in the video there, that was actually me inspecting one of our consultants. And we used an app that we started with from the fare payment vendor. And we thought that we could do better with that, and using the what's called the APIs from that vendor, we were able to design a system that's easier for the conductors to use, takes less time. So these are some screenshots of what could be shown when a conductor inspects the card that the person presents. Usually it's always approved, but occasionally the card, they might not have tapped it correctly or they get a denial. The interesting thing to note here is if you've seen you've been on the Amtrak train, you'll see the conductors have an iOS device, an Apple device, and iOS doesn't work well right now with inspecting bank cards. So we have to switch to an Android device. So that Android device is yet another thing the conductors carry, and the process takes an additional amount of time at this point in time. So we're really working to shave off the amount of time that conductor spends with the passenger before they put up the seat check and things like that. So again, Zentrans built this app, so it was a faster process, but we believe we can get it even faster still. And on the back end, eliminate the need for them to enter passenger information about the journey back on their Apple device. So the idea is to just use the back end data, which this system generates a lot of data, to satisfy that need, and hopefully we can get the inspection process down to, 4 to 5 seconds, which is roughly what they have today with the Amtrak ticketing system. So the other thing that we've been working on is who's using this. We did target a certain population that we thought would be amenable to to being a trialist in the solution. And we found, and everybody's experienced this, post-COVID ridership is a lot different than we would have expected. So people aren't using it as much, but aren't using the train as much. But those that signed up are also part of that population. So they go more occasionally than we thought. So in terms of having the weekly capping happen, not many of our riders really did that. They're riding too infrequently to do that, but they're still getting a discount based off of otherwise they'd have through Amtrak. But we realized that we need to work with the fare payment processor to work on a different product that we can offer that more matches the periods of travel that we have, the frequency of travel by different customers. So we're looking at that option here, moving ahead. And then in the next step of things is we're working again with Zentrans to look at the data that we are generating. There's a tremendous amount of data in these kind of two pictures. At the top of the picture here, we have a more lengthy period of time looking at different insights into the performance of the system. And you'll see in the orange, that's the number of people that didn't tap out that day. And I'll explain a little bit about that. And then at the bottom, just a smaller period of time, you can see that those who didn't tap out. So when you don't tap out, that represents a customer service, a refund interaction that's expected. And some of those right there are, as we're installing more of these readers on our trains, they were configured to operate like a bus. So every tap in, that's all it was. There was no tap out. So this one guy traveled, did technically four trips, and he got charged $80, and he wasn't supposed to be charged that. So we saw that, and we worked with the folks to reconfigure it. But this is the kind of information that we can see in almost a real-time basis that, we have some problems or there's some customer service issues ahead of us. So the other options here that we can get other insights, get reports, look at different trends. We can do A and B testing to conditionally see if this or that needs to work better. We can look at how the EMV readers themselves are doing. We can work at customer service and do some analysis on folks that could, in theory, evade fare. So, as I mentioned, we are pursuing things, and so is the state pursuing things on Tap2Ride and also Cal-ITP. On our side, as I mentioned, we are increasing the number of Tap2Ride options, and it will eventually be on our entire fleet. And that should be probably mid-2024. They'll be in every car. As I mentioned about the conductors, we're trying to fine-tune that fare inspection app and try to move it towards their Apple device so that they have one device that can do it all. We're also working to expand to cover the throughway buses that connect to the trains, so putting payment devices on those, and then exploring options to otherwise satisfy the manifest requirements. So if there was an incident, as we're registering people right now, that is not true open loop because you've got to register first. So we're exploring options to comply with manifest, but in a way that doesn't require you to register. And then finally, if I didn't mention, I don't think I did, right now this is just with credit cards, but we do want it to expand to include like mobile wallets, smartphones, watches, etc. So that's what we're going to do on the rail side, which is a part of the whole California picture. But the bigger California picture includes buses, rail, light rail, everything that you can imagine, and that integration between systems. And one of the first things we want to work on is exploring transfer arrangements with adjacent agencies so that, for instance, a bus in Sacramento, and you get off the train that you've tapped on, you can keep tapping off with your same card, and it can know about that and offer that kind of transfer discount to you. So a number of things to do in the back end to pull that off, but that's another direction that the state is going. The other important piece is to work to serve more riders. As we mentioned, this is only a certain population of folks. There's people that have bank cards other than Visa and MasterCard, which is all we allow right now. There'll be Discover, MasterCard added to that. And then there's a whole slew of folks who are not having bank cards or they deal in cash. And the state is working at scale to work with the banking system to get folks able to travel in this means by putting cash on a suitable via a card, become banked, and those kind of things. Then there's employee benefit programs, the tax advantage programs the state's working on. There's the Title VI eligibility discounts, the age, the veterans, things that at the state scale, they can solve those problems. And it's just data in the back end system saying, yep, that person's eligible for that senior discount. They registered for that. And then finally, group travel. It's difficult to expect a family of 4 to all have credit cards, and including the 2 kids. So being able to take groups using Tap2Ride is another important thing. So really what we're trying to do is we're just one of the pilots in a much larger experiment across California to try to get these solutions on transit overall. But it's not really all about us. It's about how do the customers feel about it. And here's just some testimonials, and I'll leave this up here. The riders are giving us feedback. They generally really like this. It's been convenient for them. They like the pricing of it. They like the convenience. And you'll see a number of comments here about folks that vary where they get on and off. And that's a different product than Amtrak offers. So this Tap2Ride has been a good success from the rider perspective. We just have to catch up on our side and take all our learnings and fix things. So if you want to learn a little more about Tap2Ride, you would contact us. My contact's at the top there. I can answer some questions here as well. But then Cal-ITP itself is a much bigger statewide program. And there's in the yellow box there's some information about how to connect with Cal-ITP at a larger scale, which is, it's a massive effort. It's a very exciting effort, and I'm happy to be involved in it. So I'll stop there and answer any questions, or hopefully answer any questions.
Excellent. And then if you could stop sharing.
Yep.
Okay, great. So I want to clarify the, as I understand it, so Capital Quarter has distance-based fares.
Yes.
So when you tap on, there's a hold put on your card for the entire fare, for the entire length. And then when you tap off, the actual fare gets charged, which is less than the entire. And so if you forget to tap off, then you've paid the entire, the biggest possible fare you can. And so people are saying, I need a refund. Am I right on that?
Almost. Yeah, you're pretty close. The thing is, when people tap on, they start the origin part of their journey, and that starts a fare calculation on some row, like you got on in Sacramento, and the system doesn't know where you're going to get off until you tap off. So we don't get charged. You don't get charged the full fare as if you forgot until sometime after the whole train journey is done, and you realize, well, you never did tap off, so we're going to charge you that other fare. So you don't really get charged until you tap off, or we validate that you never did tap off. So it's you were pretty close there. It's not like we charge you $40 and we hold it, and then okay, well, it's not all $40. So we charge you at the tap out point, which would be the normal, and then if we find out you didn't tap out, then you get charged the penalty bit.
Okay. And so I was reading that testimonial from the bicyclist who was saying when they get on the train, they're not really sure where they want to get off. I assume that's because they're looking at the BART tracking to see whether a BART train will be at, I think it was Richmond.
Yeah.
So that I never thought about that. Well, you just like you get on the train not really knowing where you get off. That seems like a huge benefit.
Yeah. Well, that comment's interesting because the conductor is going to come by and say, did you tap in, and what station you're going to get off? And they're going to put a seat check. The conductor isn't charging them, but the customer might say, well, I guess I'll get off in Oakland, but if the opportunity presents itself, I can get off earlier. No harm, no foul. I mean, the conductor said Oakland, but the person taps off at Richmond to get on BART. It's fine. It's no harm, no foul on that.
Okay. And then the other one was, so if you're not using this, I assume you can use the Amtrak app. But how else can you get a train ticket now?
Well, you can only get I'm going to be particular here because you can really only get an Amtrak ticket through Amtrak. You can only get a ticket. This isn't a ticket. This is just a means to prove that you've paid. So the lexicon changes a little bit with this. You've tapped in, so you've started a journey, and then in theory, you tap out, you end the journey. So I guess that's the mindset difference too. And in fact, it's much different than it's done in the back end on the Amtrak system, because they've already collected your fare when you use the app or you call the agent and you've paid your ticket. They just don't know what train that's going to be on. In this case, nobody knows anything until you show up and tap. And then you tap out, and that is your trip right there.
So so that's why the other person was talking about flexibility, because it's the stopping to use the app.
Yeah.
You just go, oh, I got to get on this train, and then you can tap on. So it makes it a lot more flexible.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're getting much closer to getting on a BART train or a CTA train, where it's just when you want to go,
you just go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So I was gonna, if you have more questions, there's some questions I see in the Q&A, and I can try to answer some of those too.
Normally we let Chris ask those. I do have.
Oh, sure. Okay.
And then Chris he prioritizes them. And sometimes can
collapse.
does multiples.
Yeah.
What was the other thing? So you hinted at transfers,
Mhm.
right? So today you've got a transfer with the bus, with a throughway bus.
Mhm.
So can a person, if they're doing a combined throughway bus and train today or during the test, were they able to do that, or did they have to go through the app then?
They can't do it today because we don't have the buses outfitted with the hardware. We have money to do that. We're just so busy trying to take our learnings and fix the rail to rail stuff. But probably later in the summer, we're going to get funding to allocate and get resources on the buses. And then you'll have tapping on the Amtrak throughway buses as well. When I talked about integrating with transit buses or light rail, that's a different situation. So the Amtrak to Amtrak, sort of Amtrak rail to Amtrak bus is not available yet. And we definitely told people, don't register if you've got to go to San Francisco this way because it's a bus, because you're going to end up with, you'll be Tap2Ride and then suddenly you won't. You'll be Amtrak. So we know we need to solve it, but one of the things is to bite off something that's small enough that we can manage and learn from right now. And that's going to be a whole other step up in complexity, because then we've got, other customer service issues, if somebody doesn't tap out or what have you, it gets a little different. When I was mentioning transferring to other buses between agencies, that would be kind of our Tap2Ride system plus, let's say Sacramento Regional Transit's sort of Tap2Ride system. The Sacramento region's working, and all the, not just SACRT, but other transit agencies coming into the station and are working on a contactless payment system. What we can do is, you would pay, ours would be the A fare, A, and then they would be the B fare. So the charges would be A plus B, plus maybe they even go to C, a third bus or something. So those are all full fares. What we're talking about in the future with the assistance of the state is taking A plus B and realizing, oh, they're using two things. Let's discount that whole trip and apply some of that data would apply to that payment system. So that's quite a complex thing to deal with, but that's on the roadmap ahead.
So there's the holy grail of Muni to BART to Capital Corridor to Sacramento, right?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is we're envisioning a trip from Santa Cruz on the beach all the way to South Lake Tahoe via the Capital Corridor, and you've tapped the whole way. And that's not that far away. All the pieces are in place to get something like that going.
Excellent. Yeah. Chris, what questions were there from the audience?
Yes, there are a lot of questions actually, and some of them overlap. So as Rick said, I'm gonna kind of try to batch them. And there's a lot of enthusiasm here for what you shared, Jim, too. I think that everyone shares what the frustration that Rick mentioned, having a drawer full of cards and apps too, I suppose. Yeah. And let's I know you might have kind of spoken to this one already. I'm not sure indirectly, but when you talked about how right now you only accept Visa and MasterCard, but one of our questions from Roger is the Tap2Ride system integrated with Cubic Transportation's Clipper card?
Oh, okay. I'll answer that for sure. Yeah, and the answer is no. And the reason is that it was near the first slide, the Clipper card system, that is a closed loop system. And the same with the Sacramento system. So we fell between two closed loop systems. So the question would be, well, which closed loop system should we have joined? Because we have most of our riders in Sacramento. And it's a closed loop system, so it's not really compatible. You have to turn your money into the Bay Area version or the Sacramento version of money, transit money. And so instead, the open loop system is the system of the banking system, that you don't have to turn your money into any one particular flavor. It is just your MasterCard, Visa, and future American Express and Discover. So it's not, it would be, you use your bank card just as you do for coffee. You don't, I mean, some people buy a Starbucks card and they just go to Starbucks and that's it. but you can go anywhere in a retail environment and, buy some slippers, buy some coffee, and buy a dinner for a friend, using a Tap2Ride, a Tap2Eat, a tapping system where you tap on the using your credit card or your smartwatch and that kind of stuff. So that's the big difference there. So it's not compatible, and that was one of the conundrums we had about, a lot of even our board members say, why don't you go to Tap2Ride? And we're like, but what about Sacramento? Because we can't. And then nationally, you look at that and realize if that integration was going to happen, Amtrak at a national level would have to work with New York, Chicago, any of the big closed loop systems, Los Angeles, and somehow make their ticketing system compatible with that. And that is absolutely, that's confusing. And so this is kind of a simpler step in terms of that. And so we were just caught between what's Amtrak going to do, what are these systems going to do? Well, when the state moved to go to open loop, it made a lot of sense. So we wanted to support that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And a couple people, including Fred, had similar questions about having tapping posts at stations so that people have one last chance to tap out when they leave the train. Is that under consideration or a possibility?
Certainly it is. Yeah, we that's a desire. It's definitely on the roadmap, is to give people that last chance if they forgot to tap out. The reason we didn't do that right now is because that is that becomes a civil works project, and cutting cement and getting power out there. And at the speed we were moving to try this, it was just easier to put it on the train. But it's a very good observation. You probably want to have that backup, and we're already talking about doing that. And we can do that in a more relaxed manner, and it'll just benefit the system even more, reduce customer service issues. So that's on the roadmap for sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Bob asks, can you explain the fare cap and how discounts how are discounts achieved? Okay,
certainly. So right now, the fare capping is done on a weekly basis. So as soon as you take 6, I'll just simplify it a little bit, 6 consistent trips. So I'll go Sacramento to Oakland, Oakland to Sacramento. There's 2 trips. That's 1 day. You do that again the next day and the next day, so that you get to 6 trips by that time. So you've paid the Tap2Ride price for all of those. And in my case, that's exactly the trip that I do. I would have paid $18.90 each way. All right. So then I get to the Thursday. Let's say I did that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then Thursday, I'm going to do that trip. Well, I've already done the 6 trips. So my 7th and 8th, my 9th and 10th. And if I kept riding Saturday and Sunday, they'd all be free. And then it would reset on the Monday. So that fare capping is a weekly fare cap. I'll only pay so much for the week for those OD pairs. And then after that, it's free. Then it resets again. So that's the fare capping. That's what we have today. And then we set our pricing to be effectively the price of a 10-ride ticket, divide by 10 and subtract $1. That's what the pricing that we went with. The Amtrak 10-ride pricing. So this is really about the cheapest option. In fact, for monthly riders, we made sure that fare calculator I showed you, it was always the cheapest option to start participating in Tap2Ride.
Okay, great. And I think this one too, you might have provided some commentary on when you were talking about how this is really more of a kind of proof of payment system instead of a ticketing system. But we did get a couple of questions about things like reservations. So I wanted to make sure that those people get get answers. Clark asked, how would this work for reserved trains? And Nicholas, a related question, asks, in the longer term, can this be tied to a seat reservation system and also to connecting transit mode services such as the next bus after tap out?
Mm-hmm. I think at this point in time, it might be challenging to do a reserved type system on this. So we're unreserved right now. It doesn't mean you can't, but there would be some sort of reservation made, maybe through a mobile app, that you may have put in your credit card details, but as soon as you do that, why don't you just pay for that trip and reserve, truly reserve that? There's sort of these intermediate steps where you could pay for a reservation and it does a hold and you indicate the date, and then your first tap in starts charging that. So it's not as ideal, but that's really the conundrum of train travel as being suitable for Tap2Ride. So in an unreserved system, it's a little easier. In a reserved system, it gets a lot more challenging. And then you start questioning, well, what's the right thing to do? How do you do revenue yield? And there's all sorts of reasons for having reservations. So it's not a universal solution for this, but we'd have to do some more thinking, but we're not a reservation system. So I know Amtrak's monitoring this and they're looking at it in terms of it's a lower cost of processing the ticketing payment system, but it doesn't right now lend itself to reservations.
Okay. Nicholas also asks, why will the conductors still use seat checks?
Well, the conductors use seat checks to indicate visually where the person should get off. So they ask that question. It also is a way, especially if we start integrating that into their inspection app, that we can compare what they said they were going to do. Conductor would note that and then issue a seat check versus what they really do. There's some different fraud concepts that you can think of where you wait for the conductor to say where you're going to go, and you say, oh, I'm going all the way to Oakland, and then the conductor disappears and you go downstairs and you tap on for the very next station and you're off the train, but the conductor thinks that you're still on the train to Oakland. So what will happen is in the back end, we'll see this very strange OD pairing, Sacramento to Davis with a big gap, and then return Oakland to Emeryville with another big gap. And then we'll, okay, well, this person's, pulling the fast one here, or they have a car that they use in between. So we'll have to investigate that. Those are kind of some of the, those are some of the things we have to analyze with the whole trial.
Okay, thanks. We have a couple now about privacy. Another question here from Nicholas. Do you anticipate any customer reluctance to use their cards for onboard checks to a mobile device that a bad actor could potentially capture, or where a bad actor could potentially capture the card's details?
We don't really have that word because we're not doing a inspection of the credit card details. There's no PCI compliance issues there. It's just validating the hash pan, which is a certain combination of numbers from the card. Did that hash pan tap on? And that's all it is. So, and there's no personal identification associated with that. So it's at that point, it's really just the same risk as if you had to show your card to a retail vendor. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we have those type of concerns, the privacy issues. We do keep those who register secure from that, and we do separate it from the bank card information. So there's no bad actor, no one person can get in and say, oh, I'm going to, charge Rick Harnish's credit card. Can't do that.
Okay. Here's another angle on privacy. Sometimes technology that tracks people raises privacy concerns. And I thought of that when you mentioned the manifests that get compiled automatically in case of an emergency. How long are those lists of passengers kept after the trip is over?
So they're refreshed after every trip is done, at least in the solution that we have. So as soon as you tap on, because you've registered, we know that you're on the train as soon as you register. As soon as you tap off, and let's say something happened and they needed to do that, they would have a record that you're off the train, and that's how long the data is kept in this situation. In Amtrak's overall situation, that's when the conductors inspect and see that you are on the train, and they'll attach your name to that ticket for an incident. So it's roughly very similar. It's just a matter of where did you get the list of who's on the train? And that is right now it's a federal mandate to understand on intercity trains who is on the train at the time. And kind of teared off of that Chatsworth accident many years ago.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Theo asks, from the feedback that you've received so far, is the primary selling point the cost savings or the convenience and flexibility that this offers?
I think it's probably more the convenience and flexibility. I think that's what we're seeing. I mean, some people did say they like the pricing, and we can check the pricing. Pricing is going to change over time, but really the flexibility is the real feature that's built into this whole thing, where you don't have to think ahead and you're like, well, I'm going to take the train now. And you don't have to go to your app and enter your birth date and name and everything. So I think that's got to be the number one thing, although I'm certain there's a population of folks who like the combination of like the pricing and the convenience, and some of those comments mentioned that.
Okay. And then what is the time frame for rolling this out across other corridors and systems? Is that something you can speak to?
I can't really speak to that. I can surmise about that. The time frame for us, we still have a lot of steps to go. It's not a fully open system because you do have to register. So that's a piece that we want to get to in the future. Other systems would have to look at their operations to see if they match this. And the reservations question is a good one, and that has not been cracked yet. So reserve systems may have a difficulty with this, or they'd have to adapt it in some other way. But sort of more of your commuter type systems that don't have that might be more amenable to this. And I think there's some good examples in California. Metrolink is a potential option there. Any of the other commuter systems where you're not having kind of that reservation or relay, I think are good candidates for this.
Okay. So maybe you're not able to answer this question, but it came in from Ted. When do you suppose we might be able to use the same payment system on CTA and PACE and Metra in the Chicago area?
I don't know. I mean, if they're watching, happy to talk with you about this, but I think it's just a matter of dealing with the logistics and of this opportunity. The customer convenience is quite good, but there's a lot to get set up in the back end, and we've been doing that. It's been, as they say, cracking eggs and dealing with it, and all the way from the back-end comm system, we have it associated with our Wi-Fi and the train system. But if you have a gated system, you can just put it at the stations as long as you're all gated. Many aren't that way, so there's a lot of details to work through, and as we're happy to share what our learnings are by those different detail areas. But we have a certain match of things, a certain approach that we had, and we need to, if you're interested in this as a rail agency, you would want to try to match up and deal with the issues that will arise. They will arise. So you need to think about how to overcome them, or maybe it's not for you. It's just, it needs some exploration, but it certainly is convenient and the customers really like it. So that's always a very motivating factor. And that's what really led us into this.
So if I can add to that, you can just tap on with your credit card or your phone for CTA and PACE. For Metra, you have to use the the Ventra app on your phone.
Yeah. So it's all close, isn't it? So you can almost imagine doing it. So if Ventra did that, then yes, you'd have a system that you could just keep going with.
Yeah.
Big credit to TfL too, who really was the pioneer in this contactless payment world. And some of the folks that were associated with TfL, the fellow who I quote inspected, he's ex-TfL, and he really was very helpful in explaining these lessons, because it involves things that transit agencies aren't used to, which is talking to banking systems and banking customers. And that's a very different world than transit world.
There's as you've been talking, Jim, there's been a little kind of blossoming of other detail questions about exactly how things work. So I'm going to go back to those briefly. Okay. Kirk asks, this goes back to the capping question. How would the capping, excuse me, how would the capping work for someone whose regular trips are over a different span of time, typically like Friday through Tuesday?
Okay, they would, yeah, they would fall apart from that. They would just do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then it would reset on Monday. So we've designed the tapping program around this, but we're exploring, this is one of the things that we're doing, is exploring other means of capping, which is a ride cap. So as long as you took 10 rides in a 90-day period, then maybe your 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th ride would be free. So but right now we just started off with the weekly capping, and doesn't mean that's fixed. It just means that we have to work with the fare processing payment team to put the system in place to do that. So, and that is one thing we're interested in, because we know from the data is that we have a lot of 10 ride type users. We have frequent users of the 10 rides, and we have infrequent users of the 10 rides. So managing a system to both of those sort of peaks is complex, and that's what we're working on with the fare payment processor to be able to do that. So it's not locked in that it will just be a week, but you do have to pick a period of time to apply this to. And so in a week, you got to pick a beginning and an end, and you might cut off people, like you said.
Stephen asks, can kids with phones use this system if payment types are restricted to people who are 18 or older?
Right now, kids can use it if they have a credit card and it's registered. And as like I said, we expand it to being able to tokenize, if we're ever able to tokenize a smartphone or a watch, which is very difficult to do, they could use those devices. But right now we can't tokenize because of the registration requirement, because you can't tokenize the virtual card on your phone so easily. But a credit card you could. So as long as somebody has a valid registered card, they could use it. But in the future, it would be designed to be truly open loop, that anybody could utilize it. But if you're traveling with mom and dad, and you probably don't have a credit card, that's the group travel situation that we need to solve for.
Okay. And we've got a couple more that maybe we can squeeze in here. Rick had mentioned that train riders in Japan were using a version of a tap-on system in the 90s. Have you drawn on global examples in designing and testing the system that you're using now?
Yes. So we're largely building our system off of what TfL did. The Japanese system is technically a closed loop, but it's a very big closed system. In fact, they have a system where you can use your transit card to pay for groceries at the transit center grocery area. So it's sort of a matter of scale about what touches what. And in Japan, that transit payment card was more integrated into the overall lifestyle of folks. In this case, we're tiering off of the credit card system, the Visas, the MasterCards, Discover, American Express, those kind of scale, and what you can do with those. So that's a little bit the difference, but it is really the TfL that started back when they started negotiating with Visa, and then and MasterCard moved first, and then it made Visa move, and then suddenly it's like, all right, let's just do this. And it was a wild success without a lot of promotional money, but so they've seen a huge uptake in the convenience of using this. So we're really aligned with sort of the TfL generated, the New York was next, or I think. So that's where we're aligned.
Okay. One more before we turn things back to Rick. Do you have any advice, Jim, for other agencies that might want to kind of follow in your steps and do what you've done?
I would say yes. My advice is start small. If we had suddenly somehow made this huge, like I said, we didn't have folks involved in customer service before. We didn't have a reconciliation process in place. We all had to do this incrementally and learn manually, and then build automation into it. I've never done a pilot that's been so successful in this way in terms of learning so much, and it really touched every discipline that we have at our agency. So that is my recommendation. Number one recommendation: you can take what we learned, but then if you're not quite the same as what we had, you're going to have to learn it yourself. And you may have different communication styles or contact with your customers than we do, because ours are largely, they're Amtrak folks, but we don't have direct access to them. So we have to curate our own sort of customer list. Whereas your agency may have a customer database that you can reach out to and get a pilot group together. So even those subtle differences will matter. So that's what I'd recommend. Start small, envision something that you can manage without, burdening yourself too much. There's a lot to learn, and then you can fix stuff over time. And I really like the iteration that we've had. That's probably the number one thing. Happy to have had it, and we are learning a ton. And my hair is getting gray too. So.
All right. Well, thank you. Rick, any concluding thoughts?
Yes, Jim, thank you. This was very informative. I really appreciate you doing it. Look forward to being out in California again soon, and hopefully by then actually using it. So again, thank you. And then for those who attended, thank you for coming. And I will remind you, highspeedrail.us, and then hit the Get Merch button up in the upper corner, and you too can have a really cool notebook. So thank you all for coming, and thanks, Jim, again for being here.
Thank you so much, Rick. Take care all. Bye.